Hello and welcome to an edition of the Columbia Democrats Summer Liberal Boot Camp. My name's Eric Wimer. I'm a rising junior in CC, and I'm here to tell you a bit in 5 minutes, if I can, about the situation in Iraq. So, you've been hearing about ISIS, which sounds like another version of Al-Qaeda, but really this time they're a lot more because they're gaining territory in conventional ways, like a standing army. These are not terrorists blowing up buildings and running in the shadows. They're marching in plain sight towards Baghdad. And one of the reasons they've been able to gain so much territory so quickly, capturing right over here, you'll see Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, is because al-Maliki, the president of Iraq, has been running a very sectarian regime. After the United States left at his behest, he made it his mission to get rid of all the qualified Sunni generals who could pose a risk to him. Now, as a quick rundown, Muslims are divided between Sunni and Shiite sects of religion based on a dispute over the successor of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, these divisions have come to very much define the landscape of the Middle East, and they've defined Iraq, which is about 60-40 from the top of my head, Shiite to Sunni. So though he's the majority, Maliki has oppressed the minority to the extent that they've risen up during the Arab Spring, and Maliki really hasn't done anything. So when it came to the time that a Sunni, for the most part, Sunni army made of ISIS, which is the terrorist group that was kicked out of Al-Qaeda for being too brutal, and also made out of former generals of the Ba'ath Party, the Ba'ath, I don't know how to pronounce it, but they were generals that, the Ba'ath Party was Saddam Hussein's party, but a socialist party in the Middle East that is a bit pan-Arabic, has been adapted by many different people as their flag. But the main thing is that al-Maliki accused most Sunni generals of being part of the Ba'ath Party. And so the Ba'ath Party generals, they're the ones doing most of the governing. And they are the ones running the situation on the ground. ISIS seems more interested in gaining wealth. They've pilfered about $425 million from the banks in Mosul and in funding its operations back across the border in Syria. Now, from reports, most people say that the border in Iraq and Syria is the equivalent of a mound of dirt. You can walk over it with no one stopping you, no one asking you any questions. This is basically becoming one contiguous country that's ungoverned and run by ISIS and its many affiliates. It's a bit of a who's who of the Iraq Civil War on the Sunni side, all being very much welcomed by the population, who, as you see in the yellow, it's Sunni, and orange is just like a bit combined of both, so ignore that. The yellow is Sunni. They're being welcomed by the population, so of course they're gaining all this territory very quickly. And the Shiite soldiers have no interest in defending territory where the people don't want them there. So another interesting side is that the Kurds up in the north, group defined more by ethnicity, an ethnic group, is they are developing their own contiguous states. They're being left alone by both sides, and the dream of Kurdistan, which is probably a much more natural way to divide the Middle East. The Kurds live across the borders of Iran, Turkey, and Iraq, and have been pretty much pestered and oppressed by all three. They're starting to be left alone, and especially in cities like Kirkuk, are establishing their own autonomous governments. Partly Ba'ath Party generals, partly other forces governing it. But both sides don't seem to really want to step on the Kurds' toes, so that's another third front to watch. But as to the siege of Baghdad, that shouldn't be too big a worry, because the Shia generals will remember how to fight when it's actually their own families that they're defending. Baghdad has a very heavy a very heavy Shia population, and they're going to be a lot tougher to capture, if at all possible. The only thing that could turn the balance is the involvement of outside powers. I'm sure you've heard about Iran getting involved in the situation. Iran remembers the 1980s when Iraq was run by Sunni Saddam Hussein, and they had a war for about 8 years. Absolutely brutal. Kuwait's a little oil-rich country where the U.S. has got a huge military base, got drones that they could interfere, but at the same time, Iran is a type of regime that al-Maliki has listened to a lot more than the United States. He actually did not let U.S. troops stay at the behest of Iran. And on the same side also is Syria, a far more extreme ethnic warlord who has done absolutely awful crimes against humanity in Syria. And the thing is, Maliki is going against this in this direction. The army is now at this point 80% Shia because Maliki has made a very big point of oppressing the Sunnis and very big point of trying to enforce his stranglehold through sectarian ideology. And this is why the U.S. is a lot more keen on pushing Maliki out than on taking Iran's help. Turkey's kind of stuck on the sidelines. They've got conflicting interests here. They had about 60 hostages taken, and they want to stay. They don't even want the media to talk about it. They've been putting a pretty much blackout rule on it because they were captured by ISIS fighters, and Turkey's a bit pro-Western. They also are a bit of a roadblock to Iran. They're the counterweight that we could bring in, but again, a lot of conflicting interests, and Turkey's got a lot of problems with its own people. So they're going to stay on the sidelines. Jordan is definitely anti-ISIS and very pro-Western. They've actually released terrorists from the al-Nusra group because that group is anti-ISIS. So that shows you just how worried they are about the situation. Saudi Arabia, too, they backed Iraq in that Iraq-Iran war, and they're very worried about the rise of ISIS because they're pro-Western, but at the same time also very worried about Iran and the Maliki government that they back. Iraq has been such a puppet of Iran in the past few years that they've actually allowed Jordan to refuel in Iraq. They've pretty much gone against U.S. orders if they conflict with Iran, Syria orders at any point. So it's not really wise to back what seems to be becoming another ethnic warlord in the terms of Maliki. Most Sunni citizens see the Iraqi army as no more than an ethnic militia in the same way that in the Syrian civil war, Assad and his Alawi militia, 15% of the population is oppressing the entire rest of the population. Iraq, Shiites are a majority, but still, the comparison can be pretty accurate at times, because Maliki has undone much of what the U.S. set up in terms of driving away al-Qaeda through playing the alliances against each other. All of that has come undone now, and there's no real military solution to this problem. It has to be diplomatic because, quite simply, either side, we're helping someone who is bad for the Middle East. ISIS is definitely not good for the Middle East, and al-Maliki is definitely not good for the Middle East. I'm not sure how I see this situation resolving, but for the meantime, it should be a stalemate with this ISIS-controlled area in Syria and Iraq. One area to watch out is that the front hasn't really opened in Al-Anbar province, this little area here, a very heavy Sunni area. Mostly, ISIS has been driving in from the north, from Syria. And Al-Anbar is something to watch, because if Sunnis start assembling a force there to try and take Baghdad, that's when things could turn really bad for the U.S. But let's hope that situation remains stable, the bloodshed remains minimal, but there are no easy answers. And I feel like, in my opinion at least, the only answer lies in Syria. Anyway, I've already totally overextended my time, so I'll leave it at that. Hope you're all having great summers, enjoying your internships.